The way I look at the CO2 thing is that we're running an experiment, which is to see what the CO2 capacity of the oceans and atmosphere is before Earth gets cooked. I don't think that's a wise experiment. That experiment, let's say that experiment is 99% likely to show that CO2 is no problem, but 1% likely to show that it's going to cook the planet. I don't think we want to take that 1% chance. It's just not smart.
You think 1% is the right number?
I think it's more than 1%.
You think it's what?
Well, it depends on when and how many trillions of CO2 get pumped into the atmosphere. Yeah. There's no question that at a certain level, it will destroy the Earth, or destroy large portions of the Earth. The question is just, what is that level? And how soon do we stop pumping vast quantities of CO2 into the atmosphere? Given that oil and even coal are a finite resource, it doesn't seem to make sense that we would run that experiment when we have to get off them anyway, because they're simply finite.
The climate debate is an interesting one. So if you ask any scientist, are you sure that human activity is causing global warming? Any scientist should say no, because you cannot be sure. So on the other hand, if you said, do you think we should put an arbitrary number of trillions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere and just keep doing it until something bad happens, I'd probably say no too. We essentially are running an experiment, and that experiment is to test the carbon capacity of the oceans and atmosphere. Now, that experiment may turn out to be fine. It may also turn out to be really bad. And I just don't understand why we'd run that experiment. Particularly when you consider that at some point we have to get to something that is sustainable. We have to have sustainable production of energy and consumption of energy. Because tautologically, if it's unsustainable, you will run out of it. And you can simply say, well, let's say hypothetically, CO2 was good for the environment. And let's say hypothetically, the United States possessed all the oil in the world. Well, you'd still have to get off oil because it's a finite resource. And as you start to run out of it, the scarcity would drive the cost up and cause economic collapse. And in fact, my interest in electric vehicles predates the current climate issue. I mean, I was interested in electric vehicles 20 years ago when nobody was really talking about global warming, because I just thought it was the obvious means of transport. But I do think the climate thing does add urgency to things, and I do think we will see quite a significant increase in the cost of oil. Just from a demographic standpoint, you've got China and India and a few other countries that represent almost half the world's population and have very few cars on the road, but are rapidly adding cars to the road. And so you can expect a doubling of demand, and I think it's going to be difficult to achieve a doubling of supply. So there's a certain amount of carbon that is circulating through the environment. So it's going into the air, being absorbed by, and then getting absorbed by plants and animals, and then going back into the air. And this carbon is just circulating on the surface. And this is fine, and it's been doing that for millions, hundreds of millions of years. The thing that's changed is that we've added something to the mix. So this is what I would call the sort of the turd in the punch bowl. So we added all this extra carbon to the carbon cycle, and the net result is that the carbon in the ocean's atmosphere is growing over time. It's much more than can be absorbed by the ecosystem. It's really quite simple. We're taking billions of tons of carbon that's been buried for hundreds of millions of years, and is not part of the carbon cycle, taking it from deep underground and adding it to the carbon cycle. The result is that a steady increase in the carbon in the atmosphere and in the ocean. And I'm not saying that it needs to be a radical or immediate change, or that people need to now inject a great deal of misery into their lives to avoid CO2. But we should lean in that direction. We should lean in the direction of supporting technologies that are sustainable and lean slightly against technologies that are unsustainable. That just seems pretty sensible.